In this lesson, we're going to take a look at how to cite your sources. So, how to give credit to the sources that you got your information from in your research project. So it's important to give recognition and credit to the sources of the information used in your projects, and when a person claims information that is not their own as their own, they are committing plagiarism. So if you paste sentences or paragraphs from another document, for example from a website, into a report you are writing, it is plagiarism. If you slightly reword material from another document in a report, it's plagiarism. If you use really good phrases or quotes from another person without putting them in quotes and saying where you got them, it's plagiarism. But if you use information that is public knowledge, for example, BC is a province in Canada, you don't need to worry about it. It's not plagiarism. So if it's common knowledge, information that a good portion of the population would know, then it's not plagiarism. So how to avoid plagiarism? Don't copy and paste. Sometimes students will take internet sites and just simply, they'll say, well, I'm taking notes by just copying sections and paragraphs and sentences and pasting it into another document and saying, there's my notes. Don't do that. Please use the 3-keyword system of note-taking in the format that I provided in a previous lesson, okay? Jot down notes when you are researching and create your own paragraphs. And if you see a phrase that expresses something perfectly, go ahead and use it, but cite the source. Tell where you got the phrase and who wrote it. That's what citing the source means. So there's a few different styles of integrating quotes. So when you do see something that you really want to use, and you want to use it word for word, this is how you would go about doing it. And I've got 4 examples, and they all come from the novel Lord of the Flies. So if the quote is a phrase, like fair-haired boy, and you think, well, that's a perfect way to describe it, then you would do the following. You just put quotation marks around the exact words that you are quoting. In brackets, you would put the author's last name and the page number of where you got that information, that quote, followed by a period. Now, the person reading the piece and reading this would see the word Golding and know, well, that's the author's last name. They'd then go and refer to the bibliography at the end of the project, and they'd look for Golding, and they'd find out that it's William Golding, and it comes from the Lord of the Flies novel, and it was found on page 4. Now, if the quote is a clause, although such as the red-haired boy was ugly beyond silliness, that you want to kind of insert mid-sentence, then again, you're simply going to put quotation marks around the exact words used, and again, end your sentence with the author's name, last name, and the page number. And if you wanted to, you could even place that right after the exact quote mid-sentence if you wanted. If the previous quote you used, you had already indicated Golding and the page number, then in the next quote you could just put the page number at the end in brackets too. So if the quote is a sentence, so of less than 2 to 3 lines, the author can, or you could do the following. Again, you simply place the quotation marks around the exact words that were copied, and you put the author's last name and the page number that the quote can be found at. And if the quote is more than 3 lines, okay, so 4 or more lines, then what you have to do is actually create a block quote, and that's where you indent, so tab or push 5 spaces, every line of the quote. And at the very end, you would add the parenthesis, so the brackets, with the author's last name and page number. And you'll notice something different here. In this one, you'll see that the period was placed before the parentheses. Okay, and that's the only example where you see that, where it's a block, where it's more than 4 lines. So, what you would then do, you would create a bibliography. So every project requires that you complete one. And a bibliography is a list of books, articles, and other sources used in your research, whether you mention the works in the project or not. Bibliographies follow a specific format. So for each source, you begin at the first line at the left margin and indent and double space each line that follows. So here's an example of a completed bibliography, and you can see that it's lined up to the left margin, all of these are, and the second line of each one is indented 5 places. That's the same as pushing the tab key once, okay? So left margin, except for every line after the first, indent 5 spaces, okay? So the other thing you have to do in a bibliography is use italics or underline titles of books, periodicals, and software. Articles titles are enclosed in quotation marks, and so to help you remember that, just think short works. If it was just a poem, for example, you might place in quotation marks. Longer works like novels and magazines would get underlined if you were handwriting, but if you're typing it, you really should use do italics, and so that you can see the word italics has been placed in italics. So in your word processor you'd see it's a little I and it's at a slant, and so when typing, use italics. When handwriting, you can just underline the title of the book. Follow punctuation use exactly in examples provided on the next page. If required, information such as author or place of publication is not available, just leave it out. Arrange all citations alphabetically by the first word, which will be the author's last name or first important word of the title. So let's take a look at it again, and we'll see these things. So you'll see in the examples that there is a comma that separates the author's last name by the first name. The author's name ends with a period. You see the punctuation here. This is some kind of an article. It comes from, so we've got the title of the article, we have PC World, that's most likely a magazine. We have the date that it was published, followed by a colon, the page numbers, a period. So follow that. Follow the punctuation used, okay, and follow that order that's been used, and any information that you can't find, don't include. So a lot of times, for example, on a website, you won't be able to find, say, the author, in which case you'd leave the author out, but it's still all alphabetical. If it's a book with one author, use the author's last name, then his first name, title of the book, city of publication, the publisher, the date of publication. So it will look like this. Now the only thing wrong with this example is that the year here should be indented over because it's gone over to the next line. Okay, but follow this. This is a really simple one. Follow this punctuation. If it's an internet or online source, again, you're going to use the author's last name, first name if known, the title of the article, the title of complete work, date you access the data, the the internet address, and the site address enclosed in angled brackets. And we have an example here. So if this particular source did not include the author, you just wouldn't include the author. If the site didn't have an article title, then you wouldn't include that title. Okay? So it's important that this date here be the date that you access the information, and you can only supply the information that's provided. But you know, one of the ways of telling whether, kind of keys in determining whether it's a good source or not, is that information. If you find a website and it doesn't supply the author's name, you kind of have to question whether that's necessarily a good source when you don't even know who the source is. So there are many other types of sources besides just a one author source and an internet source. And I've got a Creating a Bibliography handout included in the course that you can check out to find all of the other different types of sources and how you would add them to a bibliography. So in this course, in Humanities 9, you are going to be required to use the MLA referencing system. So when including information that is not common knowledge and does not come from yourself, you must acknowledge the source of the information within the text. And I've just shown you how to do that with brackets, or you can say the author's name in there and then just include the page number at the end. So just enough information is provided that then they can then look it up in the bibliography at the end. And so there's more examples of the types that you might see. Here's an electronic version, and so what would you do if it was an email or an internet site? You can still, again, if you have the author's name, just put the author's name in, and you can put the paragraph. If the author's name is not provided, add the title instead. If that's not provided, then you have to use the website address. Now technically, at a senior college level, your works cited list would be different than the type of bibliography covered at the beginning of this lesson. So a bibliography will include all sources that are used, while if you were in university, you might be asked to do two lists. One, a bibliography of all sources that you consulted, whether you use them or not, and one of a works cited list, which is a list of only the information that where you took quotes from and information that you used. But at grade 9 level, you're only expected to supply one resources list, and that's your bibliography. So your bibliography should be placed on a separate page with the title Bibliography centered at the top. And as I said, viewers and readers will be able to find the works cited referred to in the text to your project in the bibliography. So they've read the word Golding, for example, and because you've provided a quote, they would go to that bibliography, look for Golding's name, and find the information about where the quote came from. Now, the other thing to mention is just that it's not just quotes that need to be cited. So if you've used a piece of information and you've paraphrased it, but it's not common knowledge, then even at the end of that, you should be placing those parentheses, and you should be putting the author's name and the page number, citing the source. So it doesn't have to be a direct quote. If it's not common knowledge, if it's not something you knew and something that most people would know, then you need to do that too. For more information regarding plagiarism and how to avoid it and how to cite sources, please check out this wonderful animated website. And I've provided the link in the course to it. And go through it. It's interactive, it's fun, and you'll learn a lot about plagiarism. And so please do check that out.